The lights in Riverside Market did not just shine, they lived in the air like a thin wire of sound. Ethan could feel the pitch more than hear it, a steady tremor that settled behind his teeth and along the edges of his jaw. He named it to himself, the way he named everything that frightened him less when it had shape. 120, he thought, and the number itself felt like a rail his mind could hold. He stood at the mouth of the cereal aisle with his fingers pressed into his palms, until small half-moons told him he still had borders. The world smelled like cardboard, mint toothpaste, and something sugary that made the back of his tongue ache. Maya had said she would be a minute. She had said she would grab the prescription and come back. Ethan watched her instead become a landmark in a different weather. Tyler reached her first. His hand rested on her forearm like it belonged there, a touch arranged to look like nothing. Chase stood wider than the polite width of the lane, a casual block with sneaker toe nudging the yellow tape line near the pharmacy exit. Jake held his phone high at an angle the internet loved. Red light, soft and hungry. The lens made a small circle around his attention and turned the aisle into a stage. "Do not touch me," Maya said. The steadiness was a surface. Ethan knew the tremor underneath because he had catalogued every version of her voice since he had been small enough to ride in the back seat and count streetlights. "We just want to talk," Tyler said, his smile all white teeth and borrowed authority. Somewhere to the left, a scanner made a single short beep. Refrigerators answered with layered hum, each one slightly different, like cousins in a choir who had never learned to blend. A cart with a wounded wheel chirped once per rotation, loyal as a bird. These sounds fit into slots in Ethan's head. Facts. He gathered them because facts were rails and people were fog. The security guard drifted into view at the far end of the aisle. Gray hair, soft stomach pressing tired fabric, a ring he twisted without noticing. He paused. His eyes found Ethan. Ethan lifted his hand the way he had practiced with careful adults. "Help, please." He opened his mouth and pushed air toward a word. Nothing came. The guard's gaze slid past like a fish turning against a net. He moved on as if a clipboard held the only emergencies allowed to exist. Ethan's nails pressed harder. He logged the shoes, wrong color for the uniform code. He logged the soft scrape of Tyler's sleeve as his fingers slid higher inside Maya's elbow. He logged the rhythm of Maya's breath. "Too fast, by 2. "Stop filming," Maya said. Jake's laugh stayed small and pleased. "Why?" he asked. "You always look good." Ethan's hands began to flap before he could tame them. It was the only switch he had for flood. He hated the way people staring could feel like hands, but he hated stillness more. He tried to slow the movement, to tuck it into his ribs, to make it small enough to hide in plain sight. The noise in him did not want small. "We know you work on Maine," Tyler said, voice pitched to carry without shouting. "We know you walk home after close—" "Stop," Maya said. The word lay flat on air like a paper pressed by a thumb that would not crease. "Your boyfriend would not mind, would he?" Tyler added, softening his mouth. "Wait. You do not have one." Chase let out a chuckle like a door catching, and then swinging shut. Jake's red light burned a pinprick path through the moment. Then Tyler spoke the sentence that bent the aisle. "Nobody wants damaged goods with the freak brother," he said. The sound that started in Ethan's throat was small and animal, thin and honest. He had been told not to make noises in stores. People would stare. They stared now, their eyebrows drawing together like curtains. A mother pulled a cart closer to her side, without looking at him full on. Maya's face went pale and then bright. "Do not talk about my brother," she said. "Do not dare." Jake did not blink. "This is going to be good content," he murmured to the little red eye. "Ice Queen finally melts. Maybe she cries." The hum sharpened. The edges of Ethan's vision turned gray. The aisle markers softened into long white shapes with black bars instead of letters. He reached for the word that would make the world hear him. It lived on plastic under a zipper he could not reach. His device hung in Maya's bag on her shoulder, and her shoulder was pinned to cold counterglass by Tyler's patience. "Come on," Chase said. "Everyone knows. The kid who rocks, the kid who makes sounds, the kid who will never be normal." Ethan's hands flew harder. Music from a cheap ceiling speaker leaked into everything like syrup. The perfume from a shopper behind him smelled like orange rind tangled with hairspray. The air was all pill dust and paperboard. His skin felt like a shirt a size too small. Counting did not help, and then it helped. A little, and then not at all. "Leave us alone," Maya said. "Last warning." "Or what?" Tyler asked, calm as a piano lid lowering. "Call someone. My father sits on the school board. Chase's father coaches half the county. You think anyone believes you over us?" The security guard floated past again at the end of a cross aisle. Ethan lifted his hand higher, a gesture wrong with urgency. The guard did not see the wrong. He moved on, pivoting around an end cap of detergent with an energy like avoidance. "See," Tyler said, and because cruelty likes proof, he slid his palm up into Maya's hair, like he was moving an obstacle out of his way. Maya shoved him. It was fast, and it was right. The display of vitamin bottles rattled like plastic rain. Chase caught Maya's wrist. "Do not," she started. Ethan did not think. Thinking cost whole seconds, and he had no seconds to spare. His body spoke the only language the aisle had made room for. He ran. He ran past chewing gum and headache remedies, and the mother who tucked the cartwheel tighter to her hip, as if he were a shopping cart gone loose. His sneakers squeaked on vinyl with a quick, sad note. He aimed himself at the place where Chase's fingers pressed Maya's skin white. He aimed at the angle of Jake's phone where the red dot fed on lies. He hit Chase with all of himself, a weight of air and panic, and one single prayer he did not know how to say. Chase let go. It was surprise and not pain that loosened his hand. Ethan's shoulder knocked Maya off balance, and she caught him in the same movement, drawing him in with both arms until his forehead hit the knit of her sweater above her heartbeat. "Do not touch him," she said, and her voice snapped on the first word and found steel on the second. Jake tilted the phone toward Ethan, like he had found a new animal at the zoo. "Did you get that?" he said, bright for his audience no one could see. "Little freak just attacked me." He threw his voice down the aisle. "You saw it. That is assault." Someone drew breath like a tiny gasp at the end cap. The mother's mouth went thin in a line. In that moment, the facts rearranged into a single image that fit neatly into blame. A boy slamming into a bigger boy. It has always been easier to hold one picture than a series of minutes. "Maybe you should control your brother," Tyler said in a tone made sweet as rot. Before he hurt someone, Maya's arms tightened. Ethan could feel the muscle in her forearms quiver under the rib of the sweater. Her breath found his hair and warmed it. The smell of coffee and laundry soap made a nest around him for 3 seconds. That pretended safety. "Stay away from us," Maya said. "All of you. I mean it." Tyler's smile returned because it had never gone anywhere. He spread his hands. "What?" he asked. "Are you going to tell your father?" Then he softened the words with something like pity. "Oh wait, he is 3 states away in a truck cab." Chase laughed again, pleased by the shape power makes in public. Jake kept filming as they turned away, performance intact, backs saying invincible like jackets that had never been earned. They left. The aisle tried to become ordinary. The pharmacist leaned over a counter with exaggerated focus until his elbow took on meaning. A cashier near the end straightened gum that did not need straightening. A shopper picked up a shampoo bottle and put it back exactly where it had been, a ritual to show that nothing here mattered. "It is all right," Maya whispered into Ethan's hair and said it again because sometimes words are the only planks over a hole. "It is all right. They are gone. We are all right." Ethan did not file this under all right. He filed it under not over. He put it next to first wave. The hum in his head steadied to a single line that he could walk like a curb. At the register, the scanner beeped the way machines know how to mind their business. The cashier kept her smile at a pitch that squeaked. "Did you find everything you were looking for?" she asked. The question stepped around what had happened like water stepping around a stone it refused to name. Maya nodded and paid with a card. She almost dropped. The printer sighed out a long strip of paper, and the cashier tore it with a practiced snap. Maya folded the receipt into a precise small square, the way she folded any chaos she could touch. They stepped out into heat, bright enough to sand the edges off things. The air smelled like hot asphalt and stale fryer oil. Ethan looked left and then right, and then left again. No red car he knew too well. No boys. Just sunlight like knives and a cart corral ticking as a chain shifted. The old Civic greeted them with a soft chirp when Maya thumbed the key. Inside, the cloth seats held the faint memory of their mother's perfume, a gentle echo that did not ask anything of him. Maya started the engine and left the gear in park. She stared past the dashboard, as if the road could explain itself if she stared long enough. Ethan touched the back of her hand with 2 fingers. A light touch, not a pull, a signal that meant "I see you." Her breath came out like a puncture in a tire. "I am so scared," she said. The words were small but clear, like a single bell under traffic. He wanted his device. He wanted the right word, the one under scared, the one that also meant angry, and also meant "do not stop." He looked at the zipper on her bag and then away. Her hand returned to the wheel. He counted the seam stitches on the seat beside his cheek, because numbers did not lie. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. The numbers were a rope. He climbed. They drove home. Sunlight flickered through street trees and made a shudder of the dashboard. Ethan turned his face to the seat seam and let the rough cloth ground him. The house greeted them with the soft fatigue of a place doing its best. The lock clicked. The deadbolt, heavier, found its socket. The chain set with a small, final sound that made his shoulders drop a fraction. Curtains slid shut with a whisper. The room was dim and thick, with the quiet that lives after fear has stepped outside but not gone far. Maya leaned her forehead against the door for a second and then straightened. "It is all right," she said again. "We are here." Ethan nodded for her, not because he believed the sentence, but because the shape of agreement could hold her together for a moment. He went down the hall to his room. He stood in the doorway and looked at the small wooden desk that had one good corner and one dented corner and a drawer that stuck unless you pulled it just so. The notebook waited on the desk, square and patient. He slid it into the drawer and pushed until the wood clicked past the point that usually stopped it. On the dresser, a sweater lay folded. He lifted it and tucked the small desk key deep under the knit, then looped a thin string through it and tied the string so the weight lay warm against his collarbone under his shirt. No one needed to see a key. No one needed to know what the key touched. In the living room, he found Maya seated on the edge of the couch, with her elbows on her knees and her hands laced so tight the knuckles went white. He sat beside her and pulled the tablet from her bag. His thumbs hesitated above glass. He did not write to the world. He wrote to the room. He typed slowly because slow is what you do when you want to be exact. He turned the screen so she could read. "It will not end here." He wrote, "We will need help." Maya's mouth trembled and then steadied. She nodded once, the nod of someone who chooses movement over drowning. "Thank you," she said. and it meant more than the words could carry. The cheap door sensor chimed late, as if the house itself remembered the market a beat after they had. Ethan listened to the sound fade. The hum in his head dropped one step toward human. He stood. He would breathe. He would drink water. He would let his hands stop shaking enough to hold a pen. Then he would do the thing he could always do when the world refused to look at the right moment. He would write it down. The house listened, the way a held breath listens. Walls leaning inward, curtains resting against their own weight. Maya sat on the couch edge with her elbows on her knees and her fingers laced until the bones showed pale under skin. Ethan stood beside the armrest with his tablet warm against his palms, the words he had just typed glowing like a small lantern between them. "It will not end here. We will need help." Maya nodded once, the nod a person makes when water is up to the chin and there is no shore yet, only the choice to keep moving. She reached for her phone. The screen lit the soft bruise color under her eyes. "I am calling the school," she said. Her voice sounded rubbed thin, like paper that has been folded and refolded until the fibers remember every crease. The ringtone was too cheerful for a morning like this. A bright chime skipping down a hall. The counselor answered in a voice polished by years of parent meetings and careful forms. Madja explained, giving the moments in short, straight lines. Pharmacy aisle, cornered. Recording. Security looking away. A pause. Then the practiced phrases slid out, smooth as laminated cards. Boys that age struggle to express feelings. Perhaps a misunderstanding. Perhaps everyone needs time to cool down. Please submit an email summary so the concerns can be tracked. Maya's mouth opened and closed before sound found it. "I have reported this before," she said. Her grip whitened. Another pause. The voice did not change shape. "Thank you," Maya said, and filled the words with all the meanings they were not supposed to carry. She ended the call and stared at the black glass like it was a dead window. She scrolled again. Local police. Non-emergency. This ring had the long, dim tone of a fluorescent corridor. She told it again. Shorter. The reply came wrapped in carefulness that felt like distance without visible injury, and given a video in which your brother appears to initiate contact, this reads as a minor altercation. If the parties are juveniles, we recommend mediation through the school. Minor altercation clicked into Ethan's head like a wrong key, biting the wrong lock. He tasted metal. Maya ended the call and set the phone face down on the table as if to keep it from speaking again. For a moment the room had no sound at all. And then the cheap door sensor from the hardware store chimed late, as if fear had left a ghost behind to finish the note. Ethan moved down the short hall. The air smelled like laundry soap and the fine dust that settles on blinds. No one opens when they are afraid. In his room, the small wooden desk waited with its one good corner and its drawer that needed a tug in just the right way. On the dresser, a folded sweater covered a single key that pressed a tiny half-moon against his collarbone, suspended by a loop of string he had tied with a slow, careful knot. He liked the weight. It said, "There is a door that belongs to you." He pulled the drawer, the way the wood demanded to be pulled. The notebook lay inside, graph paper, square and patient, edges softened by heat of hands. He lifted it and felt the familiar, not heaviness of it. The way meaning weighs more than paper. Back in the living room, Maya looked up. "What is that?" she asked, though her eyes already knew. He sat and set the notebook on his knees. He opened to the first page, where his headings held their lanes like little rails. Date, time, place, detail. He had printed the words in thick black so they would not wander if he looked away. He ran a fingertip down the columns. Stop and tap. Then he slid the finger through the weeks. Maya leaned in slowly as if the paper might bruise. He did not speak. He let the pages do what they knew how to do. At the coffee shop, Chase bumping into her 3 times in one shift, the count written in the margin, because numbers calm, panic. At the corner by the gym, Tyler waiting across the street for almost half an hour. The minutes marked by a sketch of sun moving off the curb. Jake posting a photo with a caption a shade too sharp. The dates and times copied down by hand, each digit turned into letters, so his brain would not trip over the shapes. He had even kept a quiet list of who looked away. The school security guard with the dark mole along his jawline who always found something interesting just past people who needed him. The assistant manager at the market who smiled too bright and said, "Talk to me if it happens again," as if again were a weather pattern and not a person's choice. "You kept track of all of this," Maya whispered. The whisper carried a tremor that was not fear this time. It was the tremor right before anger finds a path. He nodded. He turned to the newest page, where a blank line waited for the morning's entry. He had left it empty, so his hand could find the letters, while the hum in his head still had edges. Maya exhaled like a puncture and stood. She paced a tight line from couch to door and back. Then she stopped and pressed both palms flat against her thighs. "I am calling Dr. Chen," she said. "If anyone can make someone listen, it is her." Ethan felt a small internal shelf settle level. He nodded. He watched her thumb Dr. Chen's name and bring the phone to her ear. The ring softened inside the room. Familiar. When the voice arrived, Ethan could almost see it. The small, fierce steadiness he trusted. Maya spoke. Unlike the other calls, she did not have to push the words uphill. The shape of Dr. Chen's answers formed in his head because he knew the rhythm. "I hear you. I am coming. We will handle it. She is on her way," Maya said, and some color returned to her face, like someone had opened a window, a crack. They had time, a small time, which is the kind that counts. Rituals fit into small times the way pegs fit into boards. Maya went to the kitchen and filled 2 glasses. She set one in front of him, with a small slide that made the wood whisper. He took a sip. The water was cool and ordinary, which felt like a kindness. He pulled the notebook closer, uncapped a pen with a dry pop, and wrote the words the morning required. Pharmacy aisle, hand in hair, block at exit, recording. Security looking away. Child runs at larger boy. Crowd sees the last moment, and not the rest. He paused on the word runs. He wanted a better verb than ran. He let it stand. The page needed something solid. At the window, Maya checked the curtain edge again. Her fingers ran quick over the fabric until the seam lay flat. Order made where it could be made. The late chime from the door sensor rang again. A ghost replay. The knock that came after had a rhythm. 3 short taps. A beat to breathe. 2 more. Dr. Chen's pattern for children who needed pattern to trust a doorway. Maya opened and Dr. Chen stepped in with a glance that took the whole room's temperature in a second, without making anyone feel like a specimen. "How long since you slept?" she asked, not as accusation, but as triage. "Yesterday, maybe the day before," Maya said, and her laugh bent in the middle. Dr. Chen set her bag down and drew one audible breath for everyone else to borrow. Then she turned to Ethan and did the thing that always made his shoulders lower a fraction. "Tell me in the way you need to tell me," she said. He held up the notebook. She took it like a fragile machine that could stop a larger machine. Her eyes tracked slowly, no flipping for effect, no skimming, just the steady work of understanding. The crease between her brows deepened by the smallest degree each page. When she spoke at last, her voice carried weight without volume. "This is not confusion," she said. "This is pattern. This is escalation. This is criminal stalking being dressed as persistence. So adults do not have to move." Maya closed her eyes like a string had been cut. Dr. Chen kept going, not to crush, but to build a platform beneath them. And this, she said, lifting the notebook a little, is a record built with care. It will not be easy to ignore. It will make the story hold when the world tries to shake it loose. She returned the notebook to Ethan's lap, as one returns something sacred to its altar. Then she sat. When she sat, the room found a new balance point. I have to be honest about the next step, she said to Maya. I am a mandated reporter. With your father out of state during credible threats, with the retaliation at work, with the school and police refusing to intervene, the state will call this risk. Not your fault, not Ethan's fault, but risk. I must notify Child Protective Services. Maya's body went rigid before sense could catch it. They will take him, she said. They will take Ethan, Doctor. Chen did not look away. We will not let them remove him into a setting that does not fit him, she said. We will prepare. We will show that you sought help, that you have community, that together is safer than apart. But I must make the call. Maya's hands rose, and then fell, small waves against a fixed rock. She nodded. The sound she made belonged to a place just left of crying. There is another step as well. Dr. Chen said, legal and loud. We will go legal. And also, we will make this visible enough that polite doors cannot close. You need people who document as well as you do, people who apply pressure, where institutions pretend they cannot feel. Maya's laugh came back, smaller, with edges. What are we supposed to do? She said. Hire a bodyguard. Something like that. Dr. Chen answered, and a small humor crossed her mouth. Like a bird landing for a second. A mechanic I trust. He goes by Hawk. He rides with men the town decides to fear. He also builds cases like engines, part by part. Clean hands. Clean chain of custody. No bravado. Just function. He is not lawless. He is leverage. Maya stared, trying to make leather and grease fit into the shape of safety. The school had offered angles and email addresses. The police had offered a phrase that turned harm into a minor event. Leverage sounded like hope that did not apologize for itself. May I call him Doctor? Chen asked. Maya swallowed and nodded. While she scrolled, Ethan rested his palm on the notebook, feeling the steady rectangle through the cover. He thought of the boys, how their confidence leaned like a ladder against the belief that silence means absence, and absence means weakness. He thought of how he had made silence into a ledger. He thought of the first time he learned that writing is a way to speak inside a locked room. Doctor. Chen spoke softly into the phone, voice trimmed to purpose. Then she nodded once. The garage at Diesel's. Early evening, she said when she hung up. Bring the notebook. Bring your phone. He will not promise what he cannot keep. He will promise to stand next to you where other people will not. Maya sat down hard and let the cushion hold what her knees could not. I do not know if I am ready, she said. Readiness is a story we use to delay action. Doctor, Chen said with gentleness that did not let go. You do not have to be ready. You have to be willing. Are you willing not to be alone? Maya looked at Ethan. He held her gaze. She nodded. I am willing. Good. Doctor, Chen said. Then we move in steps. First I file, then you eat. Then you lie down for a little while, even if your body thinks lying down is impossible. Then we go. She went to the kitchen with the ease of someone who has learned to claim space for care. The eggs cracked against the bowl with small bright taps. Oil sighed in a pan. The kitchen filled with the animal warmth of cooking. The refrigerator hummed its longer note. Ethan watched the clear edges of egg turn cloud white, and then soft gold at the bottom. A small alchemy he could believe. They ate at the table. Maya found her appetite in cautious pieces. Ethan counted chews and the quiet between swallows the way Dr. Chen had taught him. When they were done, Dr. Chen washed the pan and set it to dry. The sound of the plate meeting the rack was a tiny bell. Then she sat with Ethan again and turned the notebook toward the blank space. "Tell me what your hand did not have time to catch yet," she said. He typed onto the tablet while she copied the words into margins in her small, exact script. The smell of Maya's hair when Tyler's hand rose, the cold line of counterglass across her spine, the angle of Jake's phone against the overhead light, and the pinprick red glow that had reflected in the chrome frame. "Details are doors," she said quietly. "They let truth enter where argument would be turned away." An hour later they stood by the door. Maya lifted her bag, checked for keys, wallet, charger, the small practicals that mean you intend to return. "Doctor." Chen held the sensor with 2 fingers to keep it from chiming. Ethan slid the notebook into his backpack and pulled the zipper until the teeth kissed. The sound felt like sealing something safe. He paused, touched the string under his shirt where the key rested warm. He looked at Maya. He lifted the tablet and typed a single line. She read it and nodded once. The nod that turns fear into a task. They stepped into the late afternoon. The air smelled like cut grass and hot tires, and the neighbor's detergent drifting from a dryer vent. A car went by with a soft bass thump under its breath. Ethan counted the beats between thumps and named them because names are rails. He touched the rectangle of the notebook through the backpack and felt its stubborn square. They moved down the walk together. Behind them, the door closed with a soft push of air. Then the deadbolt rolled into its seat and made a clean, final sound. The lock clicked behind them. Morning hit the house like a switch thrown too bright. It slid under curtains, thinned the shadows, and made the paint look a little more tired than yesterday. Ethan lay on his back and counted ceiling bumps in rows of 7, not with numbers in his head, but with the rhythm they made, a quiet pattern he could hold like a rail. The air tasted faintly like metal, and last night's soap. Somewhere a neighbor's dryer thumped. The tablet on the table waited, a dark rectangle that could become a mouth if he needed one. Maya moved first. Springs sighed. Cabinets answered with soft wood breath. Coffee began its low, percolating murmur, a sound that makes space for thinking. Ethan padded into the kitchen and found her at the edge of the counter, holding her phone like a hot plate she could not put down. Her thumb woke the screen. Red dots bloomed. A video sat pinned at the top with that smug little tilt to its thumbnail. Jake's handle underneath, the same one he used everywhere so no one would ever miss his name. "Ready?" she said, except it sounded like a question. She tapped play. The clip skipped the parts that mattered. Nuaili cornering, no hand in her hair, no body blocking the exit, just Ethan's small frame running into chase. That jolt of collision looped with a syrupy stinger laid underneath to turn panic into punchline. Letters crawled across his face in chopped spacing. The kind of cruelty that thinks it is clever. Comments fell in a glittering pour that cut the skin when it landed. "Control your brother or someone will." One wrote, "The freak attacked first." Another said, the phrasing neat and rehearsed, like it had been waiting in a drafts folder. Maya scrolled. A teacher's daughter, a booster mother, a pair of accounts with the same sentences rearranged in slightly different order, like someone had pressed shuffle on a lie and called it a chorus. Ethan looked away from the screen before it could glue itself to his head. He watched the toaster slot instead, until it stopped looking like a mouth. A chirp cut through the room, too bright for morning. The tone Maya kept for her manager. She answered, "We love you," came the voice, sweet as a candy wrapper and just as thin. "But for safety, maybe take a few days. People are upset. You understand." "Upset at what?" Maya said, placing each word carefully, as if stepping across a floor full of glass. "Upset that your customers are friends with boys who stalk girls." "Oh, honey," the manager said, the syrup thickening. "That language is a little strong. Things are heated. Let it cool." "The situation," Maya repeated softly, and those two words sounded like fabric tearing. "Send your availability next week." The manager chirped, and the call ended with a tidy beep that felt like a door closing on someone's fingers. Maya put the phone down. The case showed her handprint for a second before the heat faded. She did not cry. She pressed her palms to the counter until the laminate left a pale track across her skin, a small cooling seam to hold onto. Ethan counted his breaths the way Dr. Chen had taught him. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. He did not need the numbers themselves. The shape was enough. The shape steadied him. The buzzing did not stop. It came in tides. Apps he did not use, names he recognized, and names he wished he did not. He flicked notifications away, and they arrived again faster, like gnats that multiplied when you waved a hand. He opened his notebook because it never lied to him. The spine gave its dry little rasp. He turned to a clean page and printed the morning in block letters, the way a person nails boards across a door before a storm. Sunday. Edited video posted. Captions weaponized. Comments escalating. Employer asks for cooling period. He left wide margins. Details always come later like late trains. At the front window, Maya used 2 fingers to bend the curtain back a careful inch. Outside, the day wore a blank expression. A woman jogged by with her ponytail slicing the light. A boy dragged a trash bin that rasped across concrete. A car came down the street too slow for traffic and too steady for lost. Red paint gleamed under a veil of dust. The engine idle carried a tiny wobble, like a heart skipping every so often. Ethan knew that wobble. Jake's Camaro drifted to a stop and lingered. The driver lifted a phone. The rectangle stared at their house the way a camera does when it thinks it owns the moment. Ethan pulled the tablet close and typed with the careful speed he trusted. Jake's car outside stopped, recording. He turned the screen so Maya could see. She lifted her own phone and filmed through the slit where fabric met frame. The number in the corner stamped itself into the moment. 10:47, she said under her breath. Not for the camera, but for evidence that likes to be named. The Camaro idled through half a minute that felt like a hallway with no doors. Then the driver snapped a photo of his own reflection in the glass and peeled away with a tire squeal that tried too hard to be brave. They ate because Dr. Chen's voice lived in their kitchen now, at least in the form of instructions that made the day less sharp. Peanut butter on toast, apples sliced along their seams, so the star of the core showed for a blink before it browned. Maya pressed a fingertip into a little dish of salt and touched it to her tongue. That quick sting that pulls a person back into the room. Ethan counted chews. He wrote between bites. He left the pen uncapped so it would not slow him down. Afternoon thickened. The air conditioner clicked and moaned and tried. A neighbor knocked on a different door, 5 apartments down, and the sound slapped through the hall and then softened as the building swallowed it. Time pulled long. Like gum between teeth, they folded laundry in tidy stacks, because order fills space where fear would like to spread. The feed bloomed again. A gossip page reposted the clip with a caption that pretended to be neutral and was not. A meme account took Ethan's blurred face and pasted it onto a looping background with a song that used the word crazy like a toy. The sound wrapped around his throat and made it its own. A text arrived from an unknown number, the thumbnail blank like a face turned away. "We know where you walk home. Tuesdays are fun." Smiley face. Maya's hands shook the way a glass trembles when a door slams. Ethan typed the ritual he had taught himself. Save. Screenshot. Time noted. He saved twice more, because sometimes the first net breaks. Late afternoon, Maya called the school. Voicemail answered with a bright recorded voice that asked for concise messages. She did not leave one. She stared at the black screen and saw a reflection she did not recognize, a girl made older in a weekend. Toward evening, the sun slid along the wall in one long blade and showed all the dust it could catch. Ethan's head began to buzz the way old lights do when the ballast fails. Too high and tight. He pressed his hands against his thighs and held them there until the tremor softened. Stillness can be a kind of movement. Holding is a kind of action. Another text arrived. A different number by a hair. Tell the Ice Queen we are just getting started. Your brother is dangerous. The town needs to know. Maya looked at the words, and then at Ethan, and then away and then back. He pulled the tablet close and typed 4 words. They will hurt Maya. He turned the screen toward her. The sentence stood up in the middle of the room like a thin beam holding canvas against wind. Maya nodded once. Forward, like a person stepping into water. Her phone hummed with the soft ripple she had assigned to Dr. Chen months ago. When she realized a tone could lower your heart rate, a message waited. The garage at Diesel's at evening, the name Hawk, and number under it. The letters looked ordinary, and therefore powerful. Maya did not say she was afraid. She did not say she hated this. She picked up the phone and pressed the number. It rang. It rang again. It sounded like a hallway leading somewhere new. A voice answered, low and careful, stripped of everything that could be mistaken for swagger. Maya poured the day into it in small, steady portions. Pharmacy aisle. Cornered. Recording. Threats. Job. Child. Notebook. The word notebook changed the voice by a degree only a close ear would notice. Bring it, the voice said. Bring everything. We will be there. Maya ended the call and let out a breath like a valve opening. She pulled her backpack from the hook and began to pack with the clumsy speed of adrenaline. Charger. Wallet. A sweater, even though the air still held the day's heat. She smoothed the couch blanket and left it folded. A little square of order that could welcome them back. Ethan went to his room. He touched the key that rested on its loop of string against his collarbone. The small half-moon it had pressed into his skin, reassuring in a way that made no sense to anyone but him. He opened the drawer, the way the drawer asked to be opened, and lifted the notebook. He slid it into his backpack so that the spine sat flush against old textbooks that suddenly felt like tools from a different life. He added the tablet and a spare stylus and the printed breathing sheet Dr. Chen had given him long ago. He did not need the paper. He liked the weight of it. Numbers weigh more when you can touch them. In the hall, Maya paused in front of the mirror and saw someone older than 16 looking back. She lifted her shoulders, not to pretend strength, but to give fear less space to settle. She thumbed the deadbolt for no reason except to hear the click. The sound steadied her. They stepped outside into evening that smelled like warmed asphalt and cut grass and a distant grill. The light had softened. A couple pushed a stroller, as if today belonged to them. A neighbor sprayed water along the edge of his driveway and pretended not to watch. Pretending is a language towns become fluent in. Maya's car gave a small groan when it unlocked. Inside, the air carried the ghost of their mother's perfume. The bottle that once tipped in the glove box and turned the owner's manual into a map of scent. Ethan slid in, clicked his belt, and pressed his palm to the square of the notebook through the backpack. The cardboard pressed back. It knew what it was. They drove. Tires drummed over a seam in the street. The radio stayed off, but the car still sang its little song. A rattle in the right door, a faint whistle above 30, a fan motor that ticked on a schedule, only it understood. Streetlights blinked awake early, one by one, as if practicing for night. The town watched them go with its windows. At the first stop sign, Maya's phone buzzed where it lay face down in the console. Another unknown number. She did not turn it over. She put her hand on top of it, as if a palm could be a lid, as if steadiness could be transmitted. She took the next turn wide to skirt the pothole that always opened there after a hard rain. They crossed a stretch with no trees, and the sky spread flat and tired. The air smelled like oil, and the suggestion of rain without the promise. Ethan counted the reflective posts along the shoulder in his head. Every seventh one wore a little dent that flashed silver in the slanting light. The pattern gave him a place to put his eyes where they would not be hurt. They paused at the light beside the grocery store, where everyone believed the story began, because that was the part they had seen. Maya's hands tightened on the wheel. Ethan did not look at the sliding doors. He looked at the invisible path his body had taken yesterday and tried not to step on it in his mind. The light changed. They went on. The sun shrugged farther down. The heat slipped off the road like a blanket, 2 blocks from the industrial strip. The phone hummed with Dr. Chen's ripple. Maya tapped speaker. "I am a car length behind you, Doctor," Chen said. "If anyone follows, I will see it. We just got another text," Maya said, "not reading it until we are parked." "Good, Doctor," Chen said, eyes forward. "Breathe." Ethan breathed like numbers fold into shape. He cracked the window the width of a finger and listened to the power lines sing their high, thin note. He named the tones without needing their names. The sign for diesels showed itself, a sun-faded rectangle bolted to a pole that had seen winters. The lot spread wide and mostly empty. 6 motorcycles sat in a row like punctuation, each a different way to end a sentence. Chrome caught the last light and drew thin white lines across the dark. Maya pulled in and killed the engine. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The cooling metal clicked like a wrist settling into a bracelet. He could feel his heart match it. She picked up her phone because she had to. She tilted it to see only once. A new text stared up. Plain words without decoration. Worse because of the lack. "We saw you leave. Nice sweater. See you at 7. Maya breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, a sound you could use as a metronome. She pressed the thread closed and slid the phone into her bag. She lifted the backpack strap onto her shoulder. She looked toward the open bay where figures moved in warm yellow light under buzzing fixtures that somehow did not hurt. "Ready?" she said. And the word felt like a bridge put down between 2 roofs. Ethan nodded. He reached back and tapped the notebook. It answered by being square and solid. He opened the door. The lot air smelled like cut steel and hot rubber and laundry soap from somewhere inside. It smelled like labor and heat, and something he could not name that made his shoulders lower a fraction. They stepped out together. The doors shut with a soft double thud. The sound felt like the first line of a different story written in the same town, but on paper that would not tear. They crossed the lot toward the place where engines waited, toward the hum that had not started, and the men who had promised to listen. The garage hummed in a lower key than the world outside, a warm yellow purr that sat in Ethan's chest instead of scraping at his teeth. Work lights made honeyed circles on concrete. Wrenches hung like quiet metal ribs along a pegboard. The air held cut steel, warm oil, laundry soap, and a clean citrus that meant somebody rinsed the bucket after mopping. The sound did not shout. It steadied. Hawk stood at a bench, a rag in one hand and a carburetor in the other, turning the piece with patient wrists. He did not fill the room with his sighs. He left space in front of him like a chair pulled out for a guest. Around him, men and 2 women in softened leather vests Watch the newcomers the way a coast watches a storm, alert without panic. Maya's fingers tightened on her backpack strap. Ethan stepped close enough that their sleeves touched, and felt her ease a fraction. "You must be Maya," Hawk said, "and you are Ethan." Ethan nodded once. He did not lower his eyes. Hawk's gaze carried the brief flicker of a man looking for the right script, then dropped the habit and simply met him where he stood. "You brought it," Hawk said. His open hand was an invitation, not a command. Maya slid the notebook from her bag as if cardboard could bruise. Ethan kept his palm on the cover until the last instant, and felt the thin pressure of the spine against his skin. Hawk wiped his hands on the rag before touching the book. A crescent of grease lived near his thumbnail. A fine white scar crossed his knuckle. The rough hand met clean paper gently. Ethan's breath caught. Boundaries were crossing without harm. Hawk opened to the first page and read with the attention of a mechanic, listening for the real problem. He made a small sound a moment later, the kind a bolt makes when it gives, then passed the notebook to a silver-haired man with a scar through one brow and shoulders, built by weight, not mirrors. "Ghost," Hawk said. Ghost took the book with both hands. Grease smudged the edges of his nails. Ash ghosted the creases of his fingers. But the way he held paper was careful, almost ceremonial. He read the way gravity behaves, steady and undeniable. Page turned after page with a dry hush that softened the whole room. "This your handwriting?" Ghost asked. Eyes on Ethan. "Not the lines." Ethan nodded. "You saw this. All of it." Another nod. "Nobody believed you." That statement put a chair between them and sat down on it. Ghost's mouth thinned. Not at Ethan, not at Maya, at something bigger and older. He ran a thumb along the wide margin, the way a man traces a coastline before he maps it. "This is not notes," he said. "This is a map." The word fell into Ethan's body like a warm stone into cold water. A map meant direction. A map meant not lost. He wanted to write the word down and pin it to the moment like a tag on a specimen. A woman with dark hair, streaked with gray, set a laptop on the bench and snapped it open. No leather vest, just a fitted jacket and a posture that carried edges in the right places. "I am Raven," she said without looking up. "Legal. Paper." The boring parts that stopped the important parts from falling through. She lifted her eyes to Maya, then to Ethan, quick and clear. "I am going to ask questions like I believe you. Because I do. If any of them feel sharp, say so, and I will round them." Maya blinked as if a window had opened in a wall she thought was load-bearing. Ethan's shoulders loosened a notch. Raven's fingers hovered over the keys. A faint graphite smear lived on the side of her hand. One fingernail carried a small chip in the polish. These were the kind of details Ethan trusted. They said a person used their hands, not just their voice. "When you photographed the messages, did you date the files the same day?" she asked. "Even and practical." "And did you label printed copies when you made them, or later?" Ethan pulled his tablet closer, opened the gallery, and showed the file names where he had spelled out months and days in words. Raven leaned in. The citrus in her sleeve touched his nose. "Good," she said softly. "That keeps the chain from cracking. We will still backstop the metadata. But this read helps." A tattooed man slid a phone onto the bench near her without crowding the keys. "Snake," he said by way of name. "I am the one who finds what people think is hidden and makes it look obvious." Ethan nodded. He believed that, the way he believed in torque and balance. Hawk disappeared and returned with a paper plate and a small carton of chocolate milk, cold enough to sweat. He set them within easy reach of Ethan. Not a question about hunger or permission, just food placed where need lived. The condensation ring widened against the bench. The sandwich corner showed a clean diagonal cut. The man saw exhaustion and offered fuel, not talk. Nobody remembers chocolate milk, Ethan thought. Hawk did. Maya made a surprised sound that almost smiled. Is that for him? She asked. Hawk's mouth ticked. For whoever needs it, he said, but his hand left the carton closer to Ethan than to Maya. Ghost nodded at the laptop. Start the outline, he told Raven. Stalking, intimidation, institutional failure. Put the school calls on record. The police call, log, the market camera, all of it. He looked at Maya. Your counselor's exact words. If you can. Maya repeated them with a precision that tasted like metal. Boys do not always know how to express their feelings. Try to see it from their perspective. The room went so quiet the lights seemed to lower their voice. A socket clicked against a stubborn bolt somewhere in the back, and then stopped. Raven typed, neat anger in each press. Ghost turned to Ethan again. I need to know if you think they will stop. Ethan did not reach for the device. He shook his head once. Hard. Why? Ghost asked. Not to challenge, to build the next step. Ethan typed now and showed the screen. They like power. They like that nobody stops them. They will get worse. A small, unspoken thing moved across faces in the room. Belief, alignment, timing, finding true. Here is what happens first, Ghost said, voice carrying without climbing. Starting tomorrow, Maya does not walk alone. School, work, home, bathroom lines. She gets an escort and a witness. Hawk runs the schedule. Snake goes up on their feeds. Their friends, their patterns. If they blink, I want to know which eye. Already mapping, Snake said, fingers flicking, screens filling with names and routes, and captured posts frozen before they could disappear. Raven, Ghost continued, we file with state police. We bypass local handshakes and holiday barbecues. If we stack enough weight, the state will move, even if the county naps. Raven nodded. A little gavel made of bone. I need copies of every screenshot and call log and the market video. We will also preserve the notebook the right way. Nobody breathes on it without signing a receipt. She lifted her eyes to Ethan. May I flag pages? She asked, like the book was a person whose consent mattered. Ethan glanced at Maya, then nodded. Raven tore thin slips of paper and marked 3 places he tapped. The paper whispered. It sounded more like a promise than an intrusion. A phone buzzed on the bench. Snake glanced, let out a quiet curse that sat low. What? Ghost said, still with his attention on Ethan. The senator's office just pushed a complaint, Snake said. Scanning. They are telling the chief that Ethan assaulted a student and that this family is running a smear. They are asking to seize the market footage to preserve it. He lifted his face, the tattoos along his neck seeming to rise. They want the victim to wear the name aggressor. Heat climbed Ethan's face like a flare. Assault. Him. The word landed like a heavy coat somebody threw across his shoulders and then walked away as if the weight belonged there. Raven's hands were already moving. Let them try, she said, voice even. If they go for the footage, we need a copy now. Chain of custody. From the manager to someone we trust. 2 drives, 2 signatures, time stamped on paper. Hawk. On it, Hawk said. He pulled his phone, and his tone stayed gentle even as the words turned into tools. Jerry, he said, and his mouth softened on the name. I need last night's aisle cams pulled to portable and copied twice. I am on my way. You hand them to me. And we both signed twice. He paused, listening. Thank you. Ghost kept his eyes on Ethan while the room shifted around them like muscle. They will try to bury this, he said. They will use every lever they have. So we build our own. Snake. You watch the boys. If they drive, you see it. If they post, you save it. If they breathe on the wrong corner, I want to feel the draft. Snake's phone bloomed with 3 columns. Names. A map. a rolling list of frozen screens. Raven saved a document, the laptop giving a small, polite sound. "One more piece," she said. "CPS. Dr. Chen is mandated. She will report the absence of a custodial adult during a credible threat. Someone will likely knock." Maya's breath skipped. Not fear exactly. More the sound of a person realizing the drop is farther than she thought. "They will take him," she said, eyes cutting to Ethan. "They will split us." "Not if they meet us here," Raven answered. "I am licensed for emergency placement. It has been a while, but it is active. If the state needs supervised housing tonight, it can be mine. You do not owe me yes. You deserve to have the choice." Ethan pressed his hand flat on the notebook, as if to measure his pulse through cardboard. Stories about kids taken moved like shadow animals in his head. The idea of being lifted from his life by tidy forms, and a badge scraped at the inside of his ribs. Ghost held his gaze. "We are not letting anyone disappear you, kid. If they try to use rules as a weapon, we will make the rules point the right way. And if rules refuse, we will make noise until they do." Hawk slid a simple receipt form to Raven. Lines for names, serial numbers, and signatures. She nodded, tucked it into a folder, already developing a weight of its own. Ethan punctured the foil on the chocolate milk and drew in the cold sweetness. It did not fix anything. It made room to keep going. Ghost's phone buzzed twice. Quick. Snake checked his too and answered the question before it formed. "Dispatch friend says the chief is already leaning on the judge. They are moving to seize the video tonight." "Then we move faster," Raven said. "Hawk, already rolling," Hawk answered, shrugging into a canvas jacket. He paused at Ethan's elbow, tapped the milk carton with 2 fingers, the way a person checks the weight of a tool. "You good?" he asked. "Plain." Ethan nodded. Pressure landed on his shoulder, brief and firm. Then Hawk crossed the bay. The big door coughed and lifted. Night air walked in. The motorcycle woke with a throatful of thunder and slipped into the lot. Snake's voice came low again. The senator's camp also seeded a rumor about the house, the father, fitness, all that. The point is obvious. Raven did not sigh. "We welcome a visit," she said. "We document it. We turn their play into record." Maya scraped her hair back, let it fall. Her eyes wore that thin shine of a person beyond tired, who has chosen motion over collapse. "Thank you," she said, the words light but costly. "Do not thank us," Ghost said. "This is the job." He leaned his hands on the bench and spoke like a judge who knew exactly where the gavel would land. "They want the law to rename a victim. That ends now. Escorts begin tonight. Raven, build the defense for the knock when it comes. Hawk retrieves the footage and puts it under our lock. Snake, keep eyes on the boys and on anyone who thinks guarding them is sport." He turned to Ethan, pinning the moment like a nail through leather. "You did the hardest part. You saw, you wrote, you kept writing when no one would look. Now we make it impossible to look away." Ethan swallowed, tasting chocolate and steel and citrus in a chord that felt like resolve. He nodded once, not to be agreeable, but to affirm. Ghost straightened. "Bring everything," he said to the room, and the night and the fight rolling toward them. "Bring the receipt, the text, the lens, the minute. We build this case in daylight and shove it under every door they try to close." Engines in the lot answered like drums. The warm yellow purr held. The notebook waited, open to the next line that would not be ignored. And for the first time since the aisle, the noise inside Ethan's head stepped back and let a steadier sound through. The garage settled into a working hush after Hawk's engine throbbed away and the big door came down with a soft rattle. Warm yellow lamps held the room steady. Ethan sat on a stool with his notebook open beside his knee and a damp carton of chocolate milk cooling his palm. The bench smelled of oil and lemon cleaner. Raven's keys tapped a quiet rhythm. Somewhere, a wrench clicked as it cooled. Snake breathed through his nose as he read, thumbs, skimming his phone like water over stone. Ghost leaned on the workbench and watched the room without moving much. A still center that kept everything from shaking apart. When Ethan's straw found air and rasped, the sound startled him. He flattened the carton, set it aside, and slid his fingers to the notebook's spine. The cardboard felt sure. He could work with sure. Snake's phone buzzed with a tone that did not belong to gossip or noise. He glanced down. Yuff setting. Local patrol car just pulled behind the market. He said, the order hit their system. Counsel for the senator called it preservation. They are on the way to secure the original hardware. Raven did not stop typing. She turned the laptop a little, pressed call, and put the speaker low on the table. The ring came through thin but steady. Hawk answered on the second breath. Wind and engine lived behind his voice. You are close, Raven asked, voice calm but pointed. One short block. Hawk said, Jerry is ready. Police are inbound. Raven said, keep the chain clean. Keep it simple. Manager to you. 2 copies. 2 receipts. You both sign. You seal the drives in tamper bags. You read the time out loud so it lives in more than ink. Copy that. Hawk said. His engine note eased as he rolled off the throttle. I am at the door. The call stayed open. Ethan stared at the laptop as if sound could turn to picture by will. A door chime pinged in the far room. A man's voice, older and worn at the edges, floated down the wire. You always pick the days I hate my job, Jerry said. You kept the place running when we were gone, Hawk answered, and there was something inside that sentence Ethan did not have a label for. Those cameras saw a child try to stop a harm. We are not letting that tape disappear. Tell me where to sign, Jerry said. Paper rustled. A pen clicked. Ethan's thumb found the notebook margin and traced a blank line he would fill later. On the bench beside him, Snake already had a small plastic pouch with a red strip across the top and a label box ready. He slid it toward Raven like a relay. The laptop carried small sounds with care, the whisper heat of a drive sliding free. The click of a plastic case set on a counter. Hawk's voice went deliberate, the way people speak when they mean to be heard by strangers. I am receiving from Jerry, general manager of the market, a digital copy of the camera view that covers the pharmacy aisle for the morning in question. I am placing this copy into a tamper-evident bag. The time by my watch is early evening. The receipt number printed at the bottom of this page is being written on the label now. The bag mouth zipped and sealed with a bright peel and press. Ethan could hear it like a line drawn. Pens dragged. Paper slid. The front door chimed again. A different voice entered, official and bored on purpose. We have a judicial order to secure the original security system, the officer said. We will be taking custody of the server now. Jerry's breath hitched. We made copies for counsel. He started. Counsel is a generous word for what I am. Rafen murmured, and did not take it back. Hawk's tone stayed level. Officer, we respect the order. The manager has provided us a duplicate. This copy is sealed with his signature and mine. He will provide you the original in compliance with your paperwork. We will not impede your duty. There was a pause long enough for a look to pass between men. Ethan felt it in the silence. The way a room leans, Ghost tapped one knuckle once on wood. Not impatience, a metronome for steady hands. You are not leaving with the original server, the officer said. Not quite a question. Correct, Hawk said. The order names the original and grants your custody. We will stand aside while you take it. The duplicate was lawfully made by the property owner, and now sits in our chain. Jerry, sign here. A pen scratched. The laptop speaker caught a second seal tearing free. A second bag closing. The tiny pop of the tab pressing home. Raven reached for her own red-striped bag, wrote on the label in careful block letters, and spoke as she wrote, Copy 1, Copy 2, received by time and place. Signatures on seal. Snake's screen lit again. His eyes narrowed. The patrol unit is parked. Another car slid near Maya's street and idled. He said, a burner phone blinked on and off near that block. One text sent. Target unknown. Ethan's tablet buzzed on the bench. The sound walked under his skin without asking. He turned the screen. A message opened like a trap. Tell her we know where she is sleeping now. His hands went cold and slick. He pushed the tablet to Ghost. Raven had the screenshot forwarded and archived before the sentence fully reached the air. Snake's mouth formed a word and then closed on it. Source? Ghost asked. Snake's thumbs moved faster. Prepaid line, he said, pinging near the old block. Enough to sketch a pattern. I can hand the state a starting map. Ghost looked at Maya. He did not make the look heavy. He made it plain. They know the house. He said, they do not know our ground. We move. Maya drew breath, thin and slow. And then, steadier. She nodded. The small sound of her backpack zipper closing felt like both a door locking and another one opening. Raven ended the call with Hawk. Bring those drives straight here. She said, then we duplicate to a third and log that copy as attorney work product. The officer can argue, but the chain will point in the right direction. She turned to Ethan and met his eyes. This is about proof. Proof does not shout. Proof does not panic. Proof stands still and makes denial expensive. A knock sounded at the narrow side door to the office hall. Not the roll-up, a polite wood knock with a little authority in it. The room stilled without stiffening. Ghost lifted his chin. Snake drifted to a side post. Raven rose, smoothed her jacket with the hand that held a graphite smear, and opened the door just enough to be a door, not an invitation. Good evening, came a woman's voice. State Child Services. We received a mandated report and need to verify living arrangements. Raven held out a folder, not waving it, offering it to be read. I am a licensed emergency foster parent with an active placement. These minors are in my supervision due to documented harassment and credible threats. Here is my license, my background clearance, the letter acknowledging my current capacity, and the direct contact for the supervising caseworker. The worker did not crane her neck to look past Raven. She read the papers in the careful way of someone more tired of errors than of people. The room breathed while she read. Ethan heard the clock over the office door tick 4 soft times. He chose not to count the 5th. Do you have safe sleeping arrangements? The worker asked. Yes, Raven said. The minors will be at my home tonight. With me present, she paused and added, for the record, threats have been made and forwarded to state police. If you need to observe the residence now, we can accommodate. Otherwise, we welcome a morning visit. The worker's shoulders eased by a degree. Morning will do, she said. I will note the threats in the file. Keep your phone on. She handed the folder back, looked once at Ethan and Maya with a human expression that did not pretend away anything, and stepped back. The soft knock of the closing door sounded like a stamp on paper. Ghost let out the breath. The room had been holding. They will try every door, Raven said. We will meet them at each one with paper. Hawk's engine returned as a rolling promise. The big door lifted, and he slid inside with 2 hard cases already sealed in red-striped plastic. Jerry says the officer took the server, Hawk said, setting the bags on the bench like they were fragile and heavy both. But the copies left ahead of them, with signatures and time and camera model written 3 ways, Manager and recipient initialed across the seal. Raven photographed the labels, then photographed herself, photographing them because procedure could be both tidy and wicked. She nodded. Good. One more copy for legal, one for the state. Then we split your path from ours. So the chain reads clean. Snake frowned down at his screen. The senator's office just pushed a line, he said. False accusations. Malicious editing. They name Ethan as an aggressor and are pushing for a charge on him. He scrolled once. They are saying misdemeanor assault. The word hung in the air like a small sharp nail. Raven's eyes went clear and hard. They will try to brand you, she said to Ethan, every word set down like a stone. They want fear to do their work. If we stand still, a clerk can stamp it before anyone reads. If we move now, we pin context next to contact. The tape shows the trap. The tape shows they cornered. The tape shows a child did what a brother does. Ethan swallowed chalk and wire and found water. He typed on his tablet in short, true lines. We move now. We show truth. They do not rename me. Ghost's mouth found a shape near a smile. That is the whole thing. Kid, he said. We move now. Hawk snapped open a pouch and set fresh red-striped bags on the bench. Drives went in. Seals pressed. Raven wrote the words again and spoke them as she wrote. Received here, sealed here, witnessed here. Snake glanced toward his maps. A red car slid past the old street again. Slow. Pings dropped off the backside of town. We should shift. Ghost nodded. They know the house. They do not know the territory. We moved to mine. They moved with the soft speed of people who know their roles. Ethan slid into the passenger seat of Raven's sedan. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender and paper. Ghost idled on the left. Hawk idled on the right. Snake's headlights settled behind them like a heartbeat. Raven eased onto the road. The blinker clicked a steady count that matched Ethan's breath. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. The numbers lived as air. Streetlights unrolled silver ladders across the windshield. Ethan watched the mirrors, not to catch fear first, but to see the guardians hold their pattern. Ghost never wavered. Hawk read shadows without turning his head. Snake's light bobbed and steadied. Halfway across town, Raven's phone vibrated on the console. She tapped speaker without moving her hands. Detective Branch here, a woman said, firm and unadorned. I read your preliminary packet and the screenshots. The district attorney is preparing charges on the boys. I will need the market footage and your full timeline as soon as possible. We will deliver in the morning, Raven said. They are pushing for a misdemeanor on Ethan to muddy the file. If they file before the footage is logged, a clerk may rubber stamp, the detective said. If the footage sits in my hand first, context will be read with contact. Bring it. Tonight if you can. Morning at the latest. We are in motion, Raven said. Good. The detective answered, and for what it is worth, I watched a store manager hand a sealed bag to a biker on a grainy camera tonight. I did not expect relief to feel like that. The line clicked off. They turned into a darker run where trees leaned close. Ghost lifted his front wheel over a little hill like a promise. His house did not announce itself. It simply stood back from the street, quiet and sure, with space around it for sound to settle before it became noise. Inside, the air held coffee and sawdust and the clean mineral of old wood. Ghost pointed at the table. Drives there. Raven. Your bag. Kids. Shoes off. Breathe. Raven cut a bag along the dotted line, slid a drive out without touching metal, set it into a small duplicator, and pressed a button. A low, friendly hum answered. A thin light crawled across a tiny screen. Ethan rested his fingertips on the table and felt the faint vibration. Copying, Raven said, not to fill air, but to make the act visible. Ghost's phone buzzed again. Snake read at the same time and grimaced. "They are not waiting," Snake said. "Counsel for the senator sent the assault complaint to the press. They want it filed at first light. They want the word to stick to Ethan's name before truth can reach it." Raven looked up. "All steel and care. They will press charges on Ethan," she said, each word placed with care. "Misdemeanor assault. If we do not move now, it will sit on his record and follow him." The machine hummed on. The room held steady as a torque wrench at the exact click. Ethan set his palm flat to the wood and felt his pulse meet the hum. He did not look away. Dawn had not fully decided what color to be when they rolled out. The road still cool enough to hold last night in its seams. Ghost took the lead. A dark shape, moving with a surety Ethan could match his breathing to. Hawk drifted slightly back and left, the steady flank, the place Ethan had learned to live in. Snake's headlight hovered behind like a deliberate star. Raven drove with her hands quiet on the wheel, a metronome turn signal flicking that Ethan borrowed for his count. In through his nose, hold. Out through his mouth. He did not rush the air. He laid it down like careful string. The high school rose from the mist as a big ship at dock, brick and glass catching a pale sky. For a heartbeat there was only tire whisper and the far thread of a bird. Then other engines arrived, one and then a few, and then a small parade, filling the lot with a warm rumble that settled low in Ethan's ribs. The first bell inside was thin and tinny. The bikes answered with a soft thunder that did not threaten so much as announce, and the little bells seemed to understand and step aside. Doors spilled students. Phones lifted like they were wired to the same muscle. Raven cut the engine and let her palm rest on the wheel a second longer. A small seam of stillness. She looked back. "Ready," she said, more question to Maya than anyone. Maya's jaw was set. Her eyes rimmed the color of not enough sleep, hair pulled back like she was about to sprint. Ethan watched the swallow travel her throat. He reached 2 fingers and pressed her sleeve. Not to pull, to point. "Here." He gave the moment a count, and the count gave something back. They stepped into the morning. Exhaust washed warm around Ethan's knees. The asphalt had kept its night coolness. Ghost was already there by the passenger door, not blocking, not crowding, simply becoming a corner he could lean into if he needed. Hawk bent at the waist until their eyes were level, the garage lights from last night still a memory in the shape of his face. "Our rules," Hawk said, voice like gravel that had been rinsed clean. "You tap my arm twice, and we step out. You stay on my left. If the noise spikes, we find quiet. We do not ask permission for your comfort. We make it." Ethan nodded. His hand found the seam of Hawk's vest and rested there. The leather was warm and worn, and beneath it he could feel the slow tide of Hawk's breathing. He matched it without trying. His body understood anchors when it found them. They moved as a small unit. Maya at the point, Raven to one shoulder, Ghost to the other, Hawk just behind with Ethan tucked in the lee. Snake walked backward a few paces ahead. Camera raised. Mouth. A tight line that said record first, react after. The rest of the charter fanned without blocking doors or lines, a corridor made of people who did not push and did not yield. The hallway swallowed them in a light that struck a higher note than the garage, not harsh like the market had been, but sharp enough to lift the hair along Ethan's arms. He named what he could see. Scoffetil, locker vents, acoustic squares dotted like small moons. He kept a catalog because a catalog gave edges to overwhelm. The principal arrived as if conjured by policy. His tie hung slightly off-center. His face held rush and fear under a varnish of authority. "You cannot be here," he said, as if the words themselves might push them back out the doors. "This is a place of learning, not a spectacle." Raven did not raise her voice. "This is a public school funded by public money. We are escorting a student who has reported credible threats and harassment. Your administration is obligated by federal law to provide safety. We are here to collect her belongings. We will not be rushed, and we will not be deterred. You cannot intimidate students, he said. There are procedures. We tried your procedures, Raven said, and slipped a folder out by its edges. Multiple reports. Counselor notes minimizing those reports. Campus security, walking past danger. She did not hand the folder over. She let the tabs show like flags. Ghost did not step closer. He let his voice travel instead. You protected boys with money, he said, and left a girl to move herself out of corners. The hallway did a new kind of quiet, not silence, but a bracing. Ethan felt it through bodies, rather than ears. A small collective leaned forward. Someone spoke from the crowd. A girl in a hoodie with her sleeves swallowed past her fingertips. He grabbed me by the gym last spring. I told the office. Nothing happened. Another voice, thin with old anger. He follows girls to their cars. Everyone knows. The sound did not rush into a roar. It layered, bead by bead, each voice landing separate and whole. A teacher near the office covered her mouth and then let her hand drop. I told a girl to see it from his perspective. She said, I should not have said that. I am sorry. Principal Davies looked ill in a way that came from more than sleeplessness. You are making a scene, he said again, but softer, as if hearing himself. The scene was made by your inaction, Hawk said, and his voice carried farther because it carried care. We are not here to break your building. We are here to name what you refuse to see inside it. Raven turned to the closest security guard. Please walk us to her locker and classroom. We will only touch what belongs to her. You may record. In fact, we invite your record. The guard looked at the principal, then at the phones, then at Maya, who did not hide. He nodded once and turned down the hall. They followed. Ethan kept his palm at the vest seam and let his lungs work like a small machine. He counted the clicks of the locker. He counted the smell of dry erase marker with its false lemon. He counted the scratch of paper against cardboard as Maya slid a sketchbook into a clear bag. A small photo slipped off a shelf and landed face down. Ethan crouched, lifted it carefully by the edges, turned it. A woman in summer light with arms around two smaller bodies. He offered it. Maya took it like a glass thing. He watched her pull a breath that had been kept back somewhere under her ribs. They stepped out of the art room into a changed corridor. Teachers lined the far edges, faces marked with something that looked like shame and like resolve. Students filled the long middle. Tyler stood by a trophy case where glass turned his face into a twin with eyes that were younger. Chase leaned one shoulder to a locker like it might hold him up if he asked nicely. Jake was not there. Ethan did not miss him. Ghost did not need theatrics. He let words be the shape. You will stay away from her, he said. You will stop posting. You will remove every image and every lie. And you will learn something that is taught too late in this country. You are not untouchable. My father, Tyler said, finding a chin but not a voice. Your father does not run this hallway. Raven said, the law does. The law is awake. Davies reached for his phone like a talisman. I am calling the police. Please do. Raven said, we would like them to see how many girls are ready to speak in front of you. A girl stepped into the thin blade of light between bodies, voice shaky and steady at once. He sent me a video. I told the counselor. I was told to be careful online. Snake tilted his phone, not in her face but toward her proof, offering record rather than demand. She nodded and held her screen so the camera could read what the adults had refused to wive. The bell rang again, silly and ordinary, and lost under everything that had already changed. Ethan felt his ears tighten and then unclench. He tapped Hawk once. not the leave tap, the I am here tap. Hawk's elbow pressed back a fraction. Good. Hawk said so low the word barely existed, and still Ethan heard it where he needed. Snake's phone buzzed in that urgent way that meant the outside was arriving. Vans, he said without looking away from his screen. Local news at the gate. A regional truck behind them. He eased sideways to the glass doors and framed the lot where white boxes would nose in like curious ships. Maya lifted. Herr Chin, I am withdrawing, she said to no one, and to the building, and to the camera that had not quite reached them. Not because of you, she told the teachers. Because I am not safe here. I am filing a complaint, and I am not alone. The hallway answered her with small words that made a chorus. Yes, me. I have screenshots. He did that. He followed me. The sound of students choosing to be heard is not a roar. It is a net that goes up and does not come down. Ghost tipped his head toward the morning. Time, he said. We did what we came to do. They turned as the first news van coasted to a stop in the fire lane, a camera mast rising like a periscope. A second fun slid in, then a third. A radio car wheeled too fast and corrected. Reporters hustled. Mics tightened fists, eyes too hungry, and exactly necessary, both at once. Cables uncoiled. A small generator coughed and caught. The lot filled with a new electricity that was not about outlets. Ethan's heart stumbled and found pace. The vest's weight felt right, not heavy. He counted the vans without numbers. The way you count breaths, when you cannot control the air. One more shape, one more camera, one more chance that truth would not be edited into a lie. Snake caught his eye and nodded. A tiny semaphore that said this part was locked. Inside, the hallway had a different geometry now. Angles allowed light to travel without bending. A teacher looked at the principal and then at the floor, and then at the students, and moved to stand with them, not in front of them. Outside, engines idled like patient animals. Raven glanced toward Ethan, a question without words. He tapped Hawk's arm once. I am here. Hawk did not move. He did not need to. Ghost opened the door, and they stepped through together into a morning that had decided on color at last. The thin bell rang again somewhere behind them for a class that would not stick in anyone's memory. A camera light snapped on in front of them, white and clean as a new page. Ethan felt the air pass in and pass out, and did not chase it. He did not have to. The world had moved, and he had moved with it. The first reporter's question died against the glass. As Raven closed the door, her palm lingered on the wheel, grounding the air between them. Outside, microphones bobbed on cables and vans, idled like domesticated thunder. Ethan watched his breath bloom and fade on the window, a soft circle he could control, then drew his fingers together and tapped twice on the cold pane. I am here. Hawk saw it, and dipped his chin once before rolling into position with Ghost and the others. Snake's voice came low through the cracked window from behind the car. Red coupe leaving the Brennan Street. He said, not towards school, cutting behind your place. Raven slid her gaze to the mirror, clearing out or escalating. Both. Ghost answered over the comms, voice flat as a ruled line. We boxed them before the mill. Keep it clean, keep it public. Hawk coasted level with Ethan's door and lifted his visor. Stay with Raven. Kid. 2 taps and I peel you out. Breathe like we practiced. Ethan nodded and pressed his fingertips to the glass again. The cars and bikes sprang away, the convoy arranging itself with a geometry that felt like safety made visible. Raven eased the sedan through tripods and startled interns. Her turn signal clicked a steady metronome. Ethan borrowed it, in through his nose for that many clicks. Hold for that many, out for that many. The rhythm put a rope in his hands. Towns slid by and counted anchors. the bakery's sugar air that always leaked out through the door seals, the feed store with salt blocks stacked like chalk bricks, the river tossing thin winter light back at the sky. The bridge joints thumped under the tires, marking distance like small knocks. Ethan kept his notebook in his lap, elastic band snug across the cover. The weight of paper a sure thing. Raven's phone buzzed in its cradle. She hit speaker. "We have eyes," Snake said. "Two in the car. Driver looks like Chase. Passenger has that Brennan jaw. They are not going home. Side road to the mill. Ghost again. All measured edges. We are ahead of them. We make a corridor. No contact unless they choose it. Raven, take the long turn. Avoid the funnel. Keep the kids steady." "Copy," Raven said, mouth set in that straight line. Ethan had learned meant files were being sorted inside her head. The sedan curved off the main drag, down along the river, then up into a cut where scrapgrass leaned in the wind. The mill rose ahead with its rows of broken panes, a tired cathedral of work and dust. The access road lay flat and gray between the birches and the water. The red coupe burst from the trees too fast. Back end light, tires screaming toward a skid. Ghost and Hawk were already there, one on each side of the lane, not blocking the way, simply occupying the space in a manner that made other choices unlikely. The coupe braked hard, nose dipping. Stopping so close, Ethan saw the hood quiver. He felt the tire scream in his teeth, a thin saw that set his molars ringing. He pressed the notebook to his chest until the vibration faded into the paper. Raven angled the sedan back and kept the engine running. Air from the vents smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and morning coffee. Snake coasted to a post to the right, phone already up, lens steady. The tiny red light, a quiet oath. Ghost walked forward 3 steps and stood in the space between the hood and a bad idea. "Hands where I can see them," he said, not loud, not soft, just a statement that filled the room that existed even out here in the wind. He did not look back, recording continuous. He added, "No gaps?" Chase's knuckles had gone the color of paper on the wheel. Tyler sat too straight, jaw working like he was grinding stone. "We did nothing wrong." He tried, the sentence polished by years of practice. "You drove toward a house where a minor witness sleeps." Ghost said, "You did that after the state woke up. That ends here." Hawk lifted 2 fingers, a small motion that cut clean through the cold air. "Pop the trunk." Chase did not move. Raven cracked her door and leaned into the opening so her words would carry. "You do not have to consent to a search," she said, textbook and kind all at once. "You do, however, have to stand in full view while every camera in this county tapes you refusing to open a trunk that contains nothing you are hiding." Tyler flicked his eyes to the mirror where Snake's lens waited. He reached down and the latch clicked. Hawk did not crowd the metal. He lifted the lid with 2 fingers at its edge and let the light walk in first. Inside, a gym bag slouched, a hoodie stank of fuel, an envelope lay face down with a torn corner, and a cheap lighter sat on the bag, as if it had placed itself there to be found. "That nothing you are hiding," Ghost said, and the wind seemed to agree. Tyler's hand darted for the envelope. Fast with panic, Hawk's boot slid, not a kick, just a calm redirection that sent the lighter skittering to settle by Snake's boot, where it stayed because the moment had changed hands. Hawk picked the envelope up by the least damaged corner and held it out. "Chain," he said. Raven was already at his shoulder, a clear bag in one hand, a marker in the other. She opened the bag and spoke as the envelope slid into plastic. "Date, time, location, witnesses." Her voice put nails in wood. Ghost repeated them like vows. Snake said them for the camera. The seal folded and the bag made a small, satisfied sound as it closed. Raven turned, so the sealed rectangle sat in frame with the coup's plate. Once Snake gave a tiny nod, she lowered it. "We are not done," Ghost said, and eased the zipper on the gym bag. Inside lay a stack of glossy prints, edges curled from handling. The top image was Maya at a bus stop, arms crossed against cold, face unguarded in that way people are when they believe no one is looking. Ethan felt something tighten under his ribs, then loosen into purpose. He had opened the notebook before he knew why. He turned to an older entry, where a small square, drawn with careful line, marked the notch of a bent corner on a kitchen photo that had gone missing. Bottom right, magnet scar. He had written that when no one believed him. He slid the notebook to the window and angled it so light touched the drawing. Ghost sifted the stack and found an image with a torn bottom corner, white underlayer showing, the wound of the tear sharp against the glossy surface. He lifted it so the day could see it. The tear matched Ethan's little square-like teeth, fit their own bite. Ethan breathed in for a slow count and let it go without snag. Raven saw where his eyes had gone, and the page that had lived with his belief for weeks. She nodded once. A circuit closed. She slid the photo into a second clear bag. "This is unlawfully obtained personal property," she said, voice steady as a level. "Seal, read, repeat." The bag sighed. She lifted it where camera and plate could both be held in the same frame. Narrative married to evidence. The way hands fold over a railing when you are done falling. It was public. Tyler tried. That picture was online. The kitchen one was not, Raven said. That one lived on a refrigerator. The torn corner matches an entry dated months ago. The corner is a signature. You are holding the pen. A sheriff cruiser rolled onto the access lane and stopped with distance and care. The deputy inside looked young in the way that meant he still explained his choices to his parents. He stepped out with his thumbs hooked in his vest, so his hands were easy to see. "Morning," he offered to the air. He did not ask who anyone was. He looked at the clear bags, and at the camera, and at the trunk. "Voluntary presentation of items," Raven said, holding the bag up. "No search beyond consent. Evidence sealed with 3 witnesses on camera. We are preserving chain and requesting state pickup." The deputy nodded once. "Understood. I will call it in." Snake's phone vibrated against his palm like a hummingbird. He answered with one word, "Branch." Detective Branch spoke in that clipped and human cadence she kept for news that needed edges. "Temporary restraining order is signed," she said. "Service is moving. A unit is en route to your location for collection. A second to the Brennan residence. Do not engage. Document and clear space." "Copy," Snake said. Raven uncapped her marker again and wrote the judge's name and the time across the top edge of the bag. Ghost took a single step back. That precise retreat of a man whose job for the next minute was to let the system do its part while keeping it honest. Tyler swallowed. A series of sharp motions in his throat, like a man trying to drink panic the way you drink water that will not stay down. He glanced at the river as if the current might carry this away if he asked. The water did not answer. Water only takes what is handed to it. Chase eased his hands from the wheel, fingers trembling, then placed them palm down on the dash, as if surrendering to a rule he had not authored. Without the hallway grin, he looked both older and younger. Hawk looked past them to Ethan. "You good, kid." Ethan tapped the notebook once, then his thumb worked the device, slow on purpose, so the words arrived clean. "The picture returns." He did not hold the screen up. He did not have to. Hawk's mouth moved into a line that might have been the outline of a smile or the beginning of a promise. The deputy spoke into his shoulder mic, plain words in a straight line. Car, trunk, items, witnesses, no heat. His tone built a story that would not wander. The cruiser lights spun a slow wash of red and blue across Hawk's vest and Ghost's rings and Raven's hands. Color that arrived and left in a heartbeat, siren silent by choice. Raven turned to Maya. Do you want to identify the photo on camera? She asked. Gentle. You can also do it later, at the station. Maya stepped to the edge of the open door, hands braced on metal. That one, she said, eyes on the sealed image. It was on our fridge. The corner bent from the magnet. She did not reach. She did not need to. Good. Raven said, that is enough. Snake tilted his phone to catch the notebook drawing. Maya's face, and the sealed bag in one frame. Observer. Victim. Proof. A triangle that could carry weight. Ghost's phone buzzed again. He listened and let his eyes go flat. Steady. State officers are moving to question the boys. He relayed, order is in place. No contact. No approach. Violate it, and you wear the bracelets. Tyler's jaw kept trying to make sound and failing. He looked at the deputy as if a new adult might co-author a softer truth. The deputy kept his gaze on Raven's marker, and the neat letters it left. Raven capped the pen with a small click that sounded like a finished thought. She dropped both sealed bags into a larger pouch and zipped it, then wrote across the top edge again. She handed it to the deputy, who signed her receipt and passed his copy back. She slid that sheet into a folder already tabbed with today's date. Tabs mattered. Ethan felt the rightness of it travel through the cardboard into his hands. Chase sagged by degrees, a tire losing air. Tyler stared at the river and found nothing there he could use. The lighter by Snake's boot stayed where it was, a quiet lesson about arrogance and Flint. Raven returned to the sedan. You did well, she told Maya, then shifted her eyes to Ethan. You too. He rested his palm on the notebook cover. The cardboard felt sure. It did not care about fathers or titles. It cared about ink and time and edges that matched. Ghost faced the wind off the water and let the cold right sharpness back onto the day. We go back, he said. We feed the kids. Then we wait for the knock to finally land on the right door. Hawk rapped his knuckles twice on the roof in a friendly code and pointed two fingers from his eyes to Ethan's chest. I see you. You are here. Ethan tapped the glass twice in answer. I am. Raven eased the car in a slow turn, leaving space for the deputy and a last clean frame for Snake's camera. The red coupe stayed where it was, trunk open like a mouth that had said enough. The bikes fell in behind. Not Chase now, only escort. The mill windows let the wind sing through broken teeth. The river moved forward the way water only knows. Ethan watched the sealed bags ride in the deputy's hands like two small ships with their own weather. On his screen he typed one more line and kept it for himself a moment longer. The paper is on our side. The station breathed a thin cold through its vents, a careful mechanical hush that filled the room the way chalk dust settles on a board after class. Light from the fluorescent tubes washed the walls a tired, white, not warm, not cruel, just official. In the middle sat a metal table with a slight wobble to one leg, and on it, Ethan's notebook lay square and calm, the one object in the room that gave him an edge to hold. Maya sat to his right with her hands folded, knuckles pale where worry pressed through the skin. Ghost chose the chair against the wall, boot hooked on a rung, presence steady as a door that would close if needed. Hawk waited near the corner where wall met doorframe, not blocking, not looming, simply there, like the idea of safety turned into posture. Raven laid folders in a neat fan and kept a narrow pen in the valley of her fingers. Snake and the others held the hallway. Engines quiet outside, like big animals sleeping under a roof. Detective Branch came in with a legal pad and a mug that smelled faintly of lemon. She said, "Thank you for coming," in a voice that turned the words into a path rather than a favor. She set the pad down beside the notebook, as if it were another witness with rights, then glanced at the camera eye in the corner and nodded for the record. Her hair was pinned back in a way that read as decision rather than performance. "We will proceed by the log you kept," she said. "We will anchor each point to the page. If you need a moment, take it. If I move too fast, slow me down." She did not ask him to speak. She asked him to show. Ethan drew the notebook closer until the spiral kissed the inside of his wrist. He felt the familiar pull to make its edges square to the table, then left it slightly askew, because reality had been slightly askew, and the page needed to tell that, too. He pressed his palm to the cover for one breath, to settle his pulse, and opened to the grid he had ruled himself. Dates and places and lines so steady they looked like rails. He slid a finger down the first relevant column. Branch read the line aloud. Not dramatic, not flat, like an archiver measuring a specimen. She asked for the next line. He turned the page. The room seemed to lean forward on its bolts. He kept to the ritual, no story beyond the story of observation, no color beyond what the light had cast. He let the paper do its job, and felt himself become a hand attached to a pencil, and a set of eyes that had refused to look away when everyone else had blinked. Raven passed copies across the table with the click of a stapler like a metronome. Hawk did not shift, but his stillness felt like a wall that would not move if pushed. Ghost drank once and set the mug down without sound. Maya sat close enough that the edge of her sleeve brushed his, a soft little anchor he could return to if the ventilation hum climbed too high. Branch reached the entry he had marked with the small sign he used when sound overwhelmed him, and the only honest thing was to freeze and measure. She paused a breath, not to pity him, but to honor the beat. "Panic event," she said quietly for the record, then went on, asking about the rhythm of shoes on the market tile, the timbre of a laugh made for cruelty, the hour the parking lot turned from silver into dark. She never pushed at feelings. She asked for detail. He gave it, and together they built a spine. When the subject shifted to theft, Ghost placed the sealed bags on the table with the careful gravity that belongs to newborns and explosives. Branch read the seal numbers into the air. The plastic gave a crisp note that sounded like winter light on a frozen puddle. Raven slid in a print of the kitchen door with the magnet bright at the corner of the empty space where a photograph had lived. Another sheet showed the stolen image recovered, its bent corner exactly as he had sketched it months ago. Ethan tapped his drawing and then tapped the bend on the print. Branch spoke the sentence the camera needed. "The recorded deformity predates the recovery, and the recovered item matches the record." Maya exhaled in a way that softened his ribs. The room did not become friendly, but it became proportionate. The page sat heavier, not from burden, from purpose. They continued, the red car idling outside a quiet street, the path across town that a certain boy took even when he lied about gyms and practice and respectable routines, the school call, the walk down the hallway, the girls who stepped forward and said the one thing a lie cannot survive, which is a simple account told without drama. Branch wrote down names and placed stars by some, not to rank their worth, but to mark the order of approach. The first interview, the second, the ones to give rest before they spoke again, the ones already standing on camera, with their courage in their hands and the truth bright behind their eyes. Each time the hum climbed too high, Ethan found the corner of the table and pressed his finger there to feel the steadiness rise through wood into bone. He did not look at the clock. He did not think of the hallway sounds that used to chase him into a stairwell and pin his breath to his tongue. He stayed on the page. Branch stayed with him. Cadence matched. Questions precise. She closed her pad when the first pass was complete. "I am going to begin interviews with the accused in the next room," she said. "You may stay or leave. If you stay, we will return for clarifiers." She looked from Maya to Ethan to the notebook, as if she were confirming 3 separate witnesses in agreement. Ethan typed a single word onto his device and turned it so Maya could read. "Stay." Maya's shoulders settled as if a strap had slipped free. Ghost gathered the sealed bags and led them to a narrow waiting room with 2 chairs, a water dispenser, and a window onto the hallway where footsteps kept the kind of rhythm that belongs to buildings where decisions are made every day. The minutes grew a courteous patience. Somewhere a recorder clicked on, somewhere a chair leg complained against tile. Ethan counted the length of the door hinges and read the small printed sign about visitor conduct 3 times, as a way to keep his eyes from filling with false pictures of the boy who had laughed on the loading dock, now laughing in another room. He did not need pictures. He had the page. Branch returned with the kind of calm that means facts have begun to pin down those who float. "Tyler claims he was at a gym," she said, neutral as a number. Ethan opened the notebook and found the line about the idling car outside Maya's house. The exhaust, a pale thread, the turn signal blinking a patient flower of amber in the dark. He placed his finger on the line and then on the time. Branch read the entry, this time slower, as if she wanted the ink itself to enter the air. She nodded once and stepped back into the corridor. In the quiet that followed, Maya touched Ethan's sleeve. The touch held no tremble now, only thanks. Hawk's slow breath filled the doorway with a steadying tide. Ghost leaned against the glass and watched the corridor with an expression that had nothing to do with victory and everything to do with duty. When Branch came a 3rd time, she did not bring the pad. She brought her open hand. Ethan rose and met it. Her grip had the exact honest pressure of recognition. "You keep a meticulous record," she said. "We are done with whispers. This county needs facts. Now we have them." Maya's eyes shone and then cleared. Ghost's mouth curled at the corners for a heartbeat, more relief than smile. Hawk's chin dipped the width of a nail, a nod for a job done by everyone who had refused to turn away. Branch gave instructions in plain words. A victim advocate would call, the order of protection would be served, any contact outside her office should be referred back to this building, and no one else. If they needed to leave town for a night, they should tell her office so the paper could travel with them. The paper, not gossip. The page, not the feed. They signed where boxes asked for names. The seals changed hands. The camera blinked its last red dot for the session. The room let go of them like a fist opening around a stone. Outside, the air was flannel cold and clean. The bikes waited in a neat line. Metal and paint and patience. Snake lifted a hand in a quiet query. Ghost nodded once, an answer that meant all clear but not finished. Raven opened the car and warmth touched their faces. Maya sat and let her shoulders meet the seat, as if it were the first chair all day that believed her. Ethan set the notebook on his knees and smoothed the cover. The elastic band looked like a horizon. He slid it on and felt the soft snap against cardboard, like the closing of a chapter, not of the story, but of a silence. Ghost leaned into the open door and looked past them toward the hill, where a large house held glass and a flag, and a story it had told itself for years. "We won a round, kid," he said. "The senator will remember. Men like that do." Ethan tapped twice on the door frame. the small signal he used to say, present when words crowded the throat. Hawk answered with two knuckles on the metal, the answer that said, "Seen." Raven steered them onto the street, with a wide turn that avoided the news vans idling by the curb. The tires sang a low, even note on the pavement that Ethan matched to his breath. They passed the school buses, yellow and ordinary, and somehow newly honest. A child at a window pressed a face to the glass and laughed at something small and free. A driver lifted a hand from the wheel in a greeting meant for anyone, and therefore meant for them. The town kept pretending to be what it had always claimed to be. Perhaps, he thought, pretending could become practice if the paper kept moving. He rested his palm on the notebook and felt the certainty of cardboard under skin. He did not need to write in this moment. He had written enough for today. The truth had a place to stand that was not his chest alone. He watched the white lane markers slide by in even dashes, breath lined up with motion, eyes on the road that led back to the garage, and the people who had placed themselves between darkness and a boy with a notebook. And for the first time in a long while, the hum in his ears matched the sound of a room where he belonged. The morning after the station felt like a house that had remembered how to breathe. In Ghost's kitchen, the coffee maker murmured a slow song, and sunlight climbed the counter in a bright stripe that warmed the jar of sugar and the nicked cutting board, and the brass key resting beside Ethan's closed notebook. He stood, with his palm on the cover, as if feeling a pulse through leather. Maya came in on quiet feet, sweater sleeves pushed to her wrists, hair pulled back with the easy gravity of someone who had slept for more than survival. She touched the key, light, as a test, then met his eyes. "Is it time?" she asked. He nodded once, and the nod felt like a latch sliding into place. He opened the notebook to the last used page. The grid waited with its calm geometry. He wrote the date in careful letters rather than numbers, because letters made sound in his head, and he wanted the sound of steady. Then he wrote the single line he had rehearsed in the dark until it fit his bone. The truth found a place to stand. The pencil left a thin, bright trail and then rested. He slid the key onto the page, closed the covers around it, and pulled the elastic band across. A small sound, a small ceremony. He lifted the chain from his neck and felt the air touch the place the metal had warmed for months. He did not feel lighter, have felt aligned a brill. In the garage bay, a front wheel turned on a stand, while Hawk Trude spoke with the patience of a farrier. Each soft tick sounded like time agreeing to behave. Ghost came in from walking the yard, 2 paper cups in his hands, and the posture of a man who had checked every fence and found it faithful. He glanced once at the closed notebook and the bare neck, and gave a short, approving breath that was almost a laugh. Raven arrived with a beanie and a laptop that hummed like a small engine. She rotated the screen. Orders served, hearing set, restraining order tight as new thread. Names correct, conditions strict. Detective Branch had called before dawn, voice clipped but not cold. Charges filed on the boys for theft and harassment. The older one listed for aiding and for obstruction. Paperwork moved like a heavy animal, Raven said, but it moved their way. Maya's shoulders released a narrow band of tension. Ethan counted the release the way he counted breath, not to control it but to honor its measurement. Hawk slid a glass of chocolate milk across the bench, as if placing a tool exactly where it belonged. Ethan drank and tasted the uncomplicated truth of sugar and cold. He did not need the words, "thank you," because Hawk's nod had already filed them. They spent the day measuring the town again, not testing it with hope, only checking its edges with caution and curiosity. At the school, the light was the same, and the smell of floor polish was the same. but the noise had changed. It lacked that razor whisper that turns corridors into an instrument. The principal arranged apologies like furniture and waited to see where to sit. Maya did not rescue him by choosing a chair. She only listened and let silence tell him which words fell short. A teacher stepped forward, the one whose eyes had slid past them a week earlier. "I am sorry," she said, and then added action like a hinge under the apology. "The counselor resigned this morning. The board posted for a replacement with legal training. Policy sessions begin next week." The phrases were simple and full of work. Maya nodded once and let that be enough for now. At the market, the fluorescent hum sounded less like a blade and more like honest electricity. The manager shook Hawk's hand with both of his, as if warming himself at a small, civilized fire. The tape had led to other tapes, he said. He did not dramatize regret. He recited inventory and protocol, and in his mouth the words had the shape of labor, not performance. Ethan kept the notebook closed and made a mental checkmark instead. They walked to the cafe with the bell that always lied a little by promising sweetness regardless of weather. A new manager stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled, eyes that knew both people and spreadsheets. She offered apology without excuse, and hours that bent to Maya's life instead of breaking it. Maya glanced at the posted schedule and the neat line that crossed out a familiar name. "No, thank you," she said softly. "Not this time. I have a different place to be." In the garage office, Ghost grumbled about extra paperwork with a smile hiding in it, and shifted a stack so that a desk opened like a small clearing in a forest. Maya sat and brought order to a drawer with the skill of someone who can coax chaos to keep office hours. Snake set up a camera by the door, the lens pointed with the promise of witness rather than threat. He showed Ethan where the feed saved and how to check the time code. Ethan liked the numbers, but more than that, he liked the certainty of them lining up with the rest of the town's machine. Raven printed forms and taught Maya how to stamp a receipt, so the ink kissed once and did not smear. Hawk showed Ethan how to feel for a nail in a tire with his palm, eyes closed, fingertips, reading the world like Braille. It fit Ethan, the discipline of touch, and the lesson that evidence lives in texture as much as in tapes. News traveled in small currents that did not drown them. The hearing would come in a handful of weeks. The order held. The county attorney had a voice like a dull saw blade, but it turned in the right direction. Tyler and Chase were home under parental weather that might mean shame or strategy. Time would tell. Jake was seen at the car wash scrubbing as if soap could erase a decision. The senator posted a statement that read like a poster stapled to a telephone pole, bland and firm, and destined to peel at the edges when actual rain arrived. At dusk, the neighborhood cooled like a pan coming off heat. Metal ticked, the wind lifted dust and set it down without malice. Ethan and Maya walked 2 blocks to remember the map of their own street by foot. A motorcycle rolled past slow, a plain jacket, a gentle engine, a 2-finger salute at the brim of a helmet. No lingering stare, no performative turning away, guardianship as habit, not spectacle. The street accepted it the way a field accepts a fence that keeps wolves out but lets deer through. On the utility pole at the corner, someone had taped a sheet of paper. It was not an ad for a sale or a lost cat. It announced a meeting for a new community action group, signed with a line that made Maya stop and breathe. The girls from the hallway, they wanted policy reform, reporting clarity, outside advocates present when complaints were filed. The print was clean, the language direct. The paper was moving on its own now, carrying its own momentum, no longer needing engines behind it to make it heard. Ethan touched the corner of the flyer, felt the roughness of tape under his fingertip, and looked at Maya. She smiled with a steadiness that reached her eyes. They sat on their stoop for the first time without counting windows or rehearsing exits. A neighbor waved and went on without demanding conversation. Another set a box of cookies on the railing and left before gratitude could turn into performance. Small gestures, once knives, now blankets. Ethan set the closed notebook beside him and let his hands rest open on his thighs. He did not need to write to breathe. He could write because he chose to, because truth deserved company, because records made the world answerable. Back at the garage, they shared sandwiches and laughter that arrived without permission slips. Raven raised a glass to boring paperwork that protects people. Snake played a clip of Hawk shutting an engine down in slow motion with dramatic music. Someone on the internet had added, and even Ghost laughed, the sound like gravel settling. When the noise thinnered out, Ghost looked at them and spoke the line that had to be said. The senator will not forget. He will move zeros from one column to another and call that virtue. He will choose committees over parking lot. Keep your eyes open. He may not aim at you. He may aim around you. He glanced at the notebook, then at Ethan. The best tool you brought us was the record. Keep it sharpened, but do not live under it. Use it like a lever, not a chain. Ethan touched the cover with 2 fingers in his private salute. He did not feel like a boy choosing between silence and violence anymore. He felt like a witness with a toolkit. There were procedures that worked when you fed them facts and stood long enough to watch them chew. He looked at Maya. She returned the look with the wire strength she wore. When deciding for both of them, we are not alone, she said. The sentence fit the room and the road and the night beyond it. Later, in the guest room at Ghost's house, Ethan listened to the quiet as if cataloging a museum of ordinary things. The refrigerator's low hum, the soft tick of cooling pipes, the wind's thumb on the eaves. He counted for comfort, not control. Sleep drifted in like a tide with no storm under it. He did not rehearse answers for detectives or plan routes around danger. He let his body keep its own evidence that rest can exist without permission from fear. In the morning there would be forms and calls and an hour at the garage desk where Maya would teach the printer to respect her. The town would try to forget, and then remember, and then argue with itself. The senator would make a move that looked like nothing and sounded like progress. It did not matter in the way it once had. Paper had weight now. Voices had anchors. On a pole at a corner, a flyer fluttered, and somewhere a girl who had stepped out from a crowd practiced her lines for a meeting she would help lead. Ethan closed his eyes and saw not the market floor, but the hallway where those girls had stood in clear light and spoken until the walls believed them. He felt the steady warmth of Hawk's vest under his palm, the quiet authority of Ghost beside a door, the measured nod of Detective Branch after the handshake. He did not think about winning or losing. He thought about work. He thought about truth, taking a chair and staying seated. He slept, not as surrender, but as proof. Morning came soft and square through the kitchen window. A pale sheet of light spread over the table where Ethan's closed notebook rested beside an envelope with the county seal. The kettle hissed once and settled into a steady breath. Maya traced the edge of the seal with a fingertip, the way Ethan traced the edges of thoughts, counting ridges, not to open it but to steady herself. Ghost set 2 paper cups down and slid one toward her, palm lingering a quiet beat, as if pinning the day in place without force. Hawk filled the doorway with his shoulders, leather creaking like a patient hinge. Raven arrived with a satchel and the crisp look she wore when every minute needed to be named and filed. Snake, ghosted in from the yard with his camera sleeping in his hands. Lens cap off, red eye dim. Detective Branch had called before sunrise. Hearing this morning, she had said in that calm wire of a voice, "Preliminary matters. The restraining order to be made durable, statements on the record. Bring the notebook. Bring your steadiness." The courthouse smelled like carpet warmed by old summers and the pepper of printer ink. The security arch hummed, metal and fluorescent. Then let them pass with a reluctant courtesy. Hawk unbuckled his belt and placed his wallet and keys in the tray, as if laying out tools for a clean engine pull. Raven named each item she slid forward. Receipts, time stumps, copies of prior orders, chain of custody documentation. The guard's jaw unclenched at the precision. Order, even in small pieces, can quiet a room. They sat near the back where the sightlines were clean. Maya centered herself between Ethan and Ghost, both of them bracket and ballast. Ethan felt the bench's varnish against his palm and counted the heartbeats of the room. Clock sweep, shoe scuff, whisper, paper. The boys arrived with their parents and a lawyer whose tie burned like a flare. "No, Senator, a driver without a face could carry his will later. Here it would be briefs and sentences, and the slow muscle of procedure." The judge entered with the practiced geometry of someone who had done this more days than the room could remember. The gallery rose, sat, breathed. The calendar worked down its list. Small storms and old names and quiet settlements. Then their case was called, and Raven stood like a yardstick of posture. Detective Branch joined her with the economy of winter. The lawyer in the flare tie tried to start with noise. He said motorcycles, the way people say wolves in old stories, as if the sound alone proved a threat. He said minors and disruption, the bell and the parking lot, the nerves of the community. The judge listened with that face the law wears when it wants nouns, not adjectives. Branch gave her nouns: escort at the request of a guardian, no trespass, compliance with school security, restraining order in effect, video secure, sworn statements by named witnesses. The room shifted barely but certainly, weight sliding to the side that had receipts. Raven handed up the chain of custody packet. The judge turned each page, paper side. The staples clicked softly. The margins were clean. She lifted her eyes to Maya and held them just long enough to register a person, not a file. She asked the other table whether they disputed authenticity. The lawyer answered with the peculiar grammar of retreat, reserving rights for a later argument he had not found yet. "Reserved," said the judge, and the word landed like a pin in a map. A clerk entered with a thin sheet and placed it before the bench. The clerk read the notice of intent to pursue a misdemeanor assault charge, seed planted in a different room by a different hand. The syllables aimed at Ethan's name like grit. Branch did not blink. She stated that the county would move to dismiss in the interest of justice upon intake, that the child's record would remain clear for any background queries in the interim. Raven, already standing, asked for that protection to be written in the margin for avoidance of doubt. The judge wrote a line that made it so and then signed an order making protection durable and procedure clear. Interference with witness or evidence would be sanctioned. The plainness of the language was a gift. It asked nothing of poetry to do the work. Maya's shoulders unknotted by a measure so small only Ethan felt it. He answered with a two-finger tap against his knee, the same "I am here" signal he had learned to trust more than sentences. Hawk's glove rested for a moment against Ethan's sleeve, a weight without words. Ghost did the math of the room with his eyes, and nodded once to himself, as if inventory now matched the invoice. Outside, the air carried that courthouse blend of dust and relief. The camera crews were slower than rumor for once. One reporter asked for pain dressed up as narrative. Ghost declined with a sentence that offered facts and nothing to feed on. The paper is filed. Let it stand. They walked to the corner and paused by a utility pole where someone had taped a flyer. Edges already curling. Community action meeting, read the heading. Under it, a list written in careful hand. Safe reporting, advocate roster, staff training. The signature line was simple and right. Girls from the hallway. Maya touched the border of the page and smiled like a person recognizing her own handwriting in a language she had been told not to speak. Back at the garage, the light felt alive and kind. Hawk laid the recovered photograph into a fresh tamper bag and pressed the seal until it whispered closed. Raven logged the label and read the string aloud, one careful character at a time, then tucked the record into its folder as if easing a child to sleep. Snake duplicated the morning's orders to drives numbered in his head and to one place he would not name beyond a shrug and a grin. Ethan set his notebook on the bench and did not open it. It knew what it contained. Today the point was to let the world around it catch up. A dark sedan eased to the curb and idled with the hush of expensive engineering. A driver stepped out with a card and a smile that tried to be neighborly. He asked, on behalf of a concerned party, whether all involved might commit to lowering tensions for the good of the community. Ghost met him a few paces from the door, hands bare, voice low. We lower nothing that keeps children safe, he said. If the concerned party wants quiet, he can begin by telling the truth in daylight. The driver's smile held, the kind that shows its stitching when pulled. He pocketed the card he had meant to leave and returned to the car, which slid away without a farewell. They ate bent sandwiches at the workbench and let the ordinary do its holy job. Maya said the cafe had called to offer her a shift again, and the word no felt less like refusal and more like choosing the right road on a map she finally owned. Branch stopped by on her way back to the station to put her hand on the signed order and say only this. The record holds. Then she looked at Ethan and added, not soft, simply true. Your notes made that easier to see. Ghost took a small hook from a drawer and twisted it into the wall above the bench. He hung a simple frame holding the judge's order. No gilding, no slogan, just the ink and the seal, not a trophy, not a warning, a backbone. He looked at Ethan with a pride that did not claim ownership. You did patient work, kid, he said. You did not beg for mercy. You measured what happened until the world had to admit it. Keep your taps. Keep your sleep. Ethan lifted 2 fingers to the glass and felt its cool certainty. He closed his eyes and could still see the courtroom's clean lines, the margin note guarding his name, Maya's shoulders, unlearning the flinch. He could hear Hawk's steady breath through leather, Raven's key ticking like distant rain, Snake's camera settling into its corner, Ghost's voice laying down the narrow road of permission, and no further. When he opened his eyes, the room had not changed, but it read easier, like a page with the shadow removed. Dusk folded into the bay. Someone on a nearby street passed at a respectful pace on a motorcycle that did not announce itself, only reminded. On the utility pole at the corner, the flyer moved in a small wind, not pleading, not defiant, simply present. The town had not transformed. Towns rarely do. But a line had been drawn in ink that would not wash out with a speed. A door had been labeled correctly. A light had been wired to a switch within reach. They stepped outside. The evening was cool and ordinary, which felt like wealth. Ethan carried the notebook under his arm without clutching it. He did not need to check the elastic band. He did not need to count the streetlights, though he did count a few for pleasure and quit before the number grew heavy. At the truck, he paused and set the notebook on the seat. The leather smelled like days, when work meant progress, not survival. He looked back at the frame on the wall, pale rectangle gleaming in the shop's soft glow. He understood the shape of the truth now. It was not a shout and not a secret. It was a ledger line kept straight long enough that even the wind had to align with it. He could live with that. He could sleep with that. He could find his way in a night like this, not because the world had become safe, but because he knew where the switch lived, and his hand knew the motion to bring the light. He climbed in. Maya followed, and exhaled the last thin layer of the day. Ghost and hawk and raven and snake closed up the shop behind them, the warm hum of power easing to a contented purr. They drove, and the dark did not test them. It made room. The record kept its shape, and if some future hand tried to bend it, Ethan knew what to do. He would open the notebook. He would write the next clean line. He would measure without hurry, until the truth stood up by itself again. In the end, this story isn't only about Ethan and Maya. It's about what happens when silence meets courage. It reminds us that injustice doesn't vanish by being ignored. It festers in the quiet corners where people convince themselves it's safer not to speak. Real gold doesn't fear the fire, as the saying goes, and the fire that nearly consumed them also revealed their strength by choosing truth over comfort. They discovered that dignity isn't something granted by others. It's something you claim by standing tall, even when your voice shakes. The story asks each of us to look closely at our own communities, our families, our workplaces, anywhere power hides behind politeness, and to remember that doing nothing is still a choice. Breaking the silence isn't easy, especially when the world tells you to stay small. But every word of truth, every act of witness, is a spark that keeps others warm. Fairness, empathy, and self-respect aren't luxuries. They're the ground beneath our shared humanity. And when we dare to protect one another, the world shifts, slowly but surely, towards something more decent, more livable, more just. If this story moved you, take a moment to share what it stirred in you. Have you ever faced a moment where silence seemed safer, but truth called louder? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs courage today. Hit the like button if the message spoke to you. And subscribe for more stories that challenge, heal, and inspire. May peace find you tonight, quiet, honest, and steady, as proof that even after the storm, the light still knows your name.